record the, there we go.
Yep.
Okay.
I saw that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Richard, I'm gonna turn off my camera and I'm just gonna go ahead and let you get started.
Okay.
Well, here we go.
So you're a volunteer, Richie,
Correct.
and can you just give me a brief rundown of what that mostly involves?
Oh, certainly. The A Little Help has a website where all of the requests are recorded, and then as a volunteer, I can go in and it's separated into different segments. For example, there's a section for rides, and that's primarily folks who need rides to medical appointments, things of that nature. There'll be a few where they need rides to go shopping or to the post office. Then there are other segments that where they need indoor help, and that could range from anything from helping wash the windows to cleaning to changing bed sheets, things like that. The other section that I primarily work with is technology help, and I have just a lot of experience with Apple products. And I found that it's not that I necessarily know the answers, but I can find the answer. And there are very few people that I encounter who don't need some help
Yeah.
with that kind of thing. And then there are others where they're just looking for a friendly visit. So there are another three or four categories, but that's basically the way it works. People call in, they to the office at A Little Help. They put up the requests, and it's really up to the volunteer as to how frequently they would do it. And I kind of go in where there are times when I've got personal things that I just need some time to do. And then there are others where if I see someone, the date's getting very close for their medical appointment, because I had someone who I and it affected me in that I contacted them the day before their appointment, and they were it was touching the way that it said, well, they had to cancel because no one had stepped up to provide them with the ride, and without the ride, they couldn't keep the appointment, and that's stuck with me.
Hmm. So
Because
did you ever engage the members you're working with in any kind of dialogue about healthy aging?
no, it tends to be when we have the time talking about their life experiences. Um,
Uh-huh.
and um, and I've always found it interesting to see how people have come to where they are today. Uh,
Yeah.
but no, it's usually on a more personal basis of what's going on in their life. But no.
Okay. Well, we're going to cover a um, a number of topics in 4 sessions, and in the aggregate, the focus is really about resilience in later life decades. And the place I want to start is about what's going on with our brain. So that's what today's focus is all about. And I'd be delighted, to get your reaction um, to how this can be useful. to members of A Little Help. And I'm totally open to inquiries. If you have a question at some point, just give me a shout and we'll pause for that question. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Now, you'll notice there's a web address there. It
Yes.
says seniorpsych.com/ALH12. If this is being recorded, you'll have a reference to that. And there is a link at ALH12 to something that we will discuss today. And I will continue to put links on that webpage. And I'll show you the website when we get a little further along. I'll be happy to show that to you. Resilience. I'll give you a second to read that, okay?
Okay. Okay.
There are very significant benefits to people who successfully construct a resilient character. And I emphasize and underline the word construct. I did a presentation once for a group in Santa Fe, and the person who was the host titled the presentation as Finding Resilience. And the first thing I said was, it's not really something you find, it's something you build. And that's what we're going to talk about today and in the next several sessions. Now, a team of researchers from NYU, Johns Hopkins, and National Institutes of Health recently, in this year, published the results of a reanalysis and pegged the risk of developing dementia after 55 at 42%. That's much higher than previous studies, and it's a sobering conclusion. It's something that should make all of us sit up and pay attention. Now, at the same time, the Alzheimer's Association recently published results of the Pointer study saying that 45% of dementia cases may be preventable. Now, this is not startling, or it's not really news, because the Veterans Administration Hospital in San Francisco published similar findings several years ago. So there's a fairly consistent set of observations that focus on a person's ability to tilt those risks that we saw in the previous page. So the 42% is not set in stone. We have the ability to tilt those odds, and it depends on the lifestyle habits we have, which we will talk about today and in the next couple of sessions. A group in Salt Lake City called Intermountain Health demonstrated that people who attain the recommended standard of 150 minutes of physical activity per week halved the healthcare utilization of other senior adults. uh, this raises a really important issue for me because I live in New Mexico, and I have a healthcare provider that has a hospital in town. And every time I do anything at that hospital, I get a very extensive set of requests for feedback. So they want to know everything about how I rated the people who provided the healthcare. Now, I applaud their efforts to try to collect feedback. However, what my healthcare provider does not do, and I'm afraid that this is true in many cases, is that they have never really been systematically moved to evaluate my lifestyle habits. They don't have any data on what kind of activity habits I have, what kind of eating habits I have, and the focus on prevention is hard to find, frankly, and that's a very, very significant lack of focus in my estimation, because this kind of research from Intermountain Health says that we could significantly reduce the demand for healthcare services with a robust focus on prevention. I love this quote. Tom Friedan was the former director of the Center for Disease Control. And interestingly, it's now called the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They've added that within the past couple of years. And he's basically saying that staying active is an amazing positive influence on our health outcomes. However, while many people know that there are benefits associated with active lifestyle habits, only 1 in 4 adults over 55 meet the recommended standards for regular physical activity. So there's close to 75% of mature adults who are missing opportunities to improve their personal health outcomes because they don't meet the recommended standard of activity. I walk on a frequent basis, about probably 5 or 6 times a week. I live out in a part of New Mexico that has some marvelous natural resources. And sometimes I will pass someone and ask them why they walk, why they get out. And they talk about fitness, they talk about weight control, they talk about the fact that it feels good. I have frankly never heard someone say, because it benefits my brain. And actually, when I was in, excuse me, when I was getting a physical last year, I brought this up, and my physician talked about the benefits, the cardio benefits and the endocrine benefits, and all kinds of benefits. And even my physician did not mention the benefits to the human brain. I'm going to switch our screen now, okay?
Sure.
Okay, now we're on the Senior Psych website. And this is available to you at any point in time. You're welcome to dig into this. And you'll notice up here on the right, there's contact. If you want to reach me, you can give me a shout, email me. There's a lot on this site, and you're encouraged and welcome to look into it. This section describes an online healthy aging profile, and that's available to everyone associated with a little help. And you can log on to, I will put this up today on the ALH 12 page. You can answer 14 questions online, or it might be 12 actually, 12 or 14 questions online, and you can get a personalized 10-page report on healthy aging. And I invite you to do that. Have you ever heard of Ghost Ranch?
No, I haven't.
It's a magnificent part of the world in northwest New Mexico where Georgia O'Keeffe spent the last 40 years of her life after her husband from New York died. It's really people in Colorado appreciate the marvels of natural resources. I have vivid memories of visiting Grand Lake and a couple of other places in Colorado that were just magnificent. Anyway, there's a blurb here about the neuropsychology of adult brains. But what we're going to do is click on the tutorial for healthy aging. And again, you can do this. I don't want to do that. Okay, here we go. Okay, in case you're not readily familiar with the brain statistics, there are 86 billion neurons in the human brain. And each one of those neurons has the potential, and we'll show you how that works, to connect with other neurons to the tune of 1,000 or 2,000 connections per neural circuit. So when you multiply a couple of thousand times 86 billion, you get an awful lot of connections that is going on in what is called the white matter in our brain. The white matter takes up about half of the volume of the brain, and it's all those billions of connections that are made when neural circuits are constructed, and particularly when we're learning something new, there's a lot of those connections. Right here, the national NIH acknowledges that 40 to 45% of adults over the age of 65 acknowledge that they have some kind of memory issue. And so that's not very different from the slide that we saw earlier about Johns Hopkins and NIH and NYU citing a 42% risk for cognitive issues that are leading in the direction of dementia. This is a typical nerve cell, and this is the actual neuron, and then the neuron sends out various axons, again, to the tune of thousands per neural cell, and it reaches out to other axons and makes a connection via what they call the synaptic knob. And then this is really a chemically mediated connection. So when people are taking antidepressants, what they're trying to do is to optimize this particular connection between different axons. And that's how people build new neural circuits. The magnificent story about the human brain is neuroplasticity, which is our ability to learn. And the wonderful news is that even in our 60s and 70s and 80s, we have the capacity to learn new things, although it's somewhat unusual for people to get into a situation where where they have to learn something new. Unfortunately, one of the reasons why the risk of dementia is so high is because people in their late life decades tend to fall back on very familiar kinds of activities. They do this pretty much the same thing over and over. But the good news is that we still have the ability to learn, and we still have what neuropsychologists call neuroplasticity into our 70s and 80s. One of the most amazing stories that I've seen, and her TED Talk has been viewed almost 30 million times, is about Jill Bolte Taylor, who was literally working at Harvard Medical School when she had a stroke. And her description of how she recovered from that stroke is a brilliant example of neuroplasticity, because basically when you have a stroke, you get the blood gets cut off to certain sections of your brain, and that part of your brain is really dormant. It's gone. But the human brain has the ability to relearn skills from movement to speech using other parts of the brain. There's this amazing video, which you're invited to take a look at, that demonstrates the results of a guy named Paul Bach-y-Rita, who demonstrates how people can see with their tongue. It's talk about neuroplasticity. That's an incredible story. So a great video to watch if you're interested in this. The part of our brain right behind our forehead is called the prefrontal cortex. And the human brain doesn't really mature until our mid-20s. So if you have grandchildren like I have grandchildren, and they my own children when they were 14 and 15 and 16, they showed an excellent example of how the human brain is not fully mature. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for something called executive functions. And these are all skills related to problem solving and are absolutely essential when we talk about academic success. So the ability to focus attention, the ability to anticipate, the ability to plan and organize, impulse control, and particularly working memory are all functions of the prefrontal cortex. Now, one of the challenges we have in later life is to keep that part of our brain challenged. We'll talk about that more in a second. The big news for me is about the hippocampus, and there's a great diagram here. You can see that, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It's a seahorse-shaped section of our brain right in the middle of our head. It's tucked away underneath and on top of other sections of our brain. The hippocampus is the central switching station for memory. And one of the great pieces of news that we have discovered in the last couple of decades is that, contrary to what people believed for a long time, which was that the human brain does not generate new neuron growth, there is neurogenesis capability in the hippocampus. You can literally grow new neural circuits in the hippocampus, which has a major impact on our memory. And everyone, as far as I'm concerned, and this is one of the reasons I'm physically active on a regular basis, is because I want to generate that new neuron growth in the hippocampus and preserve my memory functionality for as long as I possibly can, which is basically as long as I can keep moving. There's a great article. I think the New York Times may have changed their policies, but there's some great articles by a guy named Richard Restak. If you can't access this particular one, you should Google Richard Restak and memory, and he's got lots of articles in lots of different places. I think that he even also has some YouTube segments that are very helpful in terms of understanding how memory works. The other thing is that there are techniques for improving our memory, and those techniques are something called mnemonics. And for anyone interested in sustaining their memory capabilities, I recommend those. This is a link. You can watch this YouTube video. Again, we're on the website, Senior Psych.
Mhm.
Right. I referenced earlier the white matter, where millions of nerve fibers connect with other axons in different neural circuits in our brain. And basically, one of the challenges we have, and this is a really terrific video by a guy named John Rady of Harvard Medical School. He talks about the incredibly important agenda item of staying active and the benefits to our brain and our brain function. One of them is the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factors, that Rady calls miracle grow for the brain. Every time I look at the benefits associated with physical activity for the brain, there's something new. It's just incredibly important to stay active, and hopefully one of the things we're going to do in this program is to emphasize the importance of staying active. Let me ask you a question of the people that you work with or the people that you help in your volunteer role. How many of them are physically able to walk for exercise?
It's a pretty low percentage.
A low percentage.
Yes. Yes.
Huh.
Often when I'm first meeting someone, I'll set up my car so that if they have a walker or a rollator that it can fit easily into the car. I have a few folks who they have a kind of a mobile wheelchair. It's smaller. It takes more strength to move it, but many of the folks, it's a small percentage, I would say, that has that kind of mobility. It yeah, it's a relatively small percentage.
So for someone who uses a wheelchair, is there any attempt to sustain physical activity?
In all honesty, their physical activity has not been something that's ever been a point of discussion between myself and the individuals. It's
Uh-huh.
I guess in part because two reasons. One, from my perspective, I consider it intrusive to ask that kind of thing, and two, the thing that I've been most impressed by in the conversation thus far is the connection between exercise and the brain, because I had never made that connection. I always looked at it from physical activity from the standpoint of helping to maintain my mobility, but not as it might have a positive effect for my brain.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Richard, I'm gonna just chime in here real quick, just because when you asked Richie about like that, I would actually have to say, as a little help, we probably would not necessarily encourage a volunteer to physically try to do exercising with a member in a wheelchair. There's too much liability. And I think to Richie's point, it could be coming off intrusive. It really would only happen if a member said they would like something with that.
Right, right,
But
exactly.
it is certainly not something. I mean, to be perfectly honest, if um, Richie kind of said he did it, we'd probably be like, I don't know if you should have done that.
I'll throw it
Right.
in.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. That's definitely not something we would encourage to do again, unless a member's like, oh, I would say, even if a member said, I would love it if a volunteer could come over and help me stand and get in and out of a wheelchair and help me move my legs and help me do squats, we would probably say no,
Uh-huh.
because of liability.
Uh-huh. However, it's possible that some members may be motivated to be more physically active, and that's not a responsibility that a little help has to assume.
Correct. I mean, again, if someone like we do have, Richie kind of gave you the whole thread of the type of different things he does and all the requests that are out there. We have a fair amount of members who ask if someone could come over and they are in a walker maybe, or they have a cane, and would they mind someone just going and walking around the block with them? They just want someone next to them because they are unsteady. So we definitely have members who do that. It's just the whole idea of too much hands-on. If something
No,
goes wrong, that's just too much liability. But our
sure.
members are
No, I totally get
certainly,
that.
are asking, would you go for a walk with me? Would you do that type of thing?
Uh-huh. Interesting.
The requests are very task specific in things that they need help getting in doing. And I've never experienced it where it extended beyond, and they're very happy um, that the assistance is there to help them accomplish something that they couldn't otherwise.
Right. Well, hopefully, uh, some people in the 11 o'clock hour may be more motivated to try to be more active in order to generate the benefits to their brain.
Well,
But
sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say that I can tell you that from my personal perspective, um, this piece has given me a much broader sense of the value of exercise. And in that sense, because one of the things that you do worry about is being part of that 40 or 45% that slides into less cognitive awareness. And
Right.
um, and to the extent that focusing on physical activity, it doesn't just help the body, but also can help the brain, is a big plus for me and what I've heard this morning.
Well, I'm hoping that it will be a bit of a revelation for many of the people who are participating. Um, there is a piece of research in this paragraph that studied people who spent their 30s and 40s and 50s doing routine jobs with little mental stimulation. In other words, basically, they were doing the same thing over and over and over during their years of work. Now, as you can see here, people who did the same thing had a 66% higher risk of cognitive impairment and a 37% increased risk of dementia after 70. Now, that lesson, in addition to the physical activity, that lesson is something all of us need to be aware of in our 60s and 70s and 80s and beyond. We need to keep challenging our brain in terms of learning new things so that we don't encounter the outcomes that are described here in terms of increasing our risk of cognitive impairment and dementia. So in addition to the physical activity, there is a very important agenda item related to learning something new in order to challenge our brain. Unfortunately, I think what happens a lot in late adult years is that people settle into routines and they pretty much do the same thing every day. And that's a risk in terms of the dementia statistics that we talked about. There are a couple of other paragraphs there. I mentioned that there are a couple of places, namely Coursera and edX and Khan Academy, where people can sign up to learn something brand new, whether that has to do with Chinese cuisine or learning how to speak French or Spanish. And while these sites are now focused on trying to get people to earn certificates, there's still a lot of opportunity to do new learning for free. So there's a great opportunity there. The other thing that I'm very focused on is the benefits for behavioral health. I cite a Stanford University piece of research here that demonstrates the benefits to the brain of being in a natural setting, whether that's being at the beach or being in some kind of public natural resource setting. Could be a national park or any kind of park. You know, there are parks all over the place. And I quote something called Shinrin-yoku, which basically is a Japanese habit where health providers advise their patients to head out into the woods, breathe deeply, and be at peace. I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint here. Yeah, this is the study that I referenced earlier, which talks about the risk of cognitive impairments for people who are doing the same old stuff all the time. One of the important psychological dimensions in our later life decades is what psychologists call locus of control. I think it's more well known as personal agency. And it's one of the questions we ask in most of our questionnaires, which is, do you believe that you're in charge of your personal destiny, or that your future will be determined by factors beyond your control? Now, as we age, there's an increased risk of encountering some kind of chronic illness. For those of us who survive into our 70s and 80s, almost all of us have had the experience of losing someone we love dearly and has been an intimate friend. I personally have had to mourn the passing of two of my college friends who I have known since I was 18. And those kinds of experiences make it more difficult to believe that I'm in charge of my personal destiny. But this is a really critical issue and something I hope I can get people thinking about, because I would like to encourage people to move in the direction toward feeling like they're more influential and more capable of shaping their future. And there are a couple of ways we can look at that. There are some people, and I did a research study in Silicon Valley when I lived in California. I did a research study with 1,600 adult residents of Silicon Valley. And there are some people who will watch what we're doing here and what we're going to be doing in the weeks to come, and they're going to feel more highly motivated to be active and to engage in some kind of cognitive stimulation. But the reality is, especially from a psychological point of view, is that knowledge of how activity sustains your brain function and the motivation to do something different does not frequently translate into the change of behavior. That's one of the reasons, primarily, that one of the previous slides cited that only 24% of senior adults meet the recommended standards for physical activity because people have difficulty. They find it challenging to translate what they have learned about the brain into behavior change. And this is something that we will address more carefully in our fourth session. But I wanted to note here that it's a significant challenge. I am a big fan of a woman named Kristin Neff, and at the ALH 12 webpage, I have posted these two links, one to her website, selfcompassion.org, and the other to a YouTube segment that she does. And one of the things about learning and constructing resilience is our ability to be self-compassionate. And we are, in many cases, incredibly understanding and supportive and encouraging to our close friends when they experience a setback. And at the same time, we can be very critical of ourselves when we do something that doesn't make much sense. So I encourage all of our members who will be more in attendance at the later session to check out the resources under Kristin Neff's website, because it's a really incredibly smart piece of learning. So just to review a couple of the highlights, I'm interested in people stimulating neurogenesis in their hippocampus. The hippocampus, again, is the central switching station for memory. And we have discovered that we're capable of generating new neural circuits in that hippocampus. And that's a goal that I would like people to endorse. Miracle-Gro for the Brain, BDNF. Again, we can generate this incredible chemical. It's a protein that benefits all of our brain functions by staying active. Number 3, doing the same thing over and over has risks, and it increases our risk of encountering dementia. So the requirement here is to try to learn something new and to challenge ourselves and to challenge our brain to become knowledgeable and competent in a new area. This is Tom Friedan's quote. It's a great one to remember. Here I'm promoting an internal locus of control. I want people to take charge to the extent possible and to impact future health outcomes in a positive direction. Successive approximations. That is a term from a psychologist called B.F. Skinner. I assume most of us have heard of him. In the 60s and 70s, he was the most famous psychologist in the world, really. I actually got to attend a small group seminar that he did in Massachusetts in the early 70s. And somebody, after he did his presentation, somebody in the audience asked him how he managed to teach pigeons to play ping pong. And if you Google Skinner and pigeons and ping pong, it's not genuine ping pong, but it's a it's a facsimile. Anyway, someone asked him how he managed to do that, and Skinner replied, gradually, very, very gradually. And that's something I recommend for anyone who watches this presentation and decides that they're going to be more active in one way or another. Be very modest in terms of your goals and very patient, and understand that complex behaviors are capable of being broken up into very small steps. And that's what successive approximations means. Okay, so there we are at the end of the presentation. And we're 5 minutes away from the end of the session. So I'd be delighted to hear your reactions.
Well, couple of things. One, I found particularly resonated with me was, and I'd always kind of looked at it that my failures and imperfections stick with me like Velcro. My successes slide off like Teflon. And that is something that it takes a long time to try to let go of the one and hold on to the other.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest thing for me is the fact that exercise and activity impacts the brain, is just it's another piece that for encouraging for staying active on a physical basis. And from my personal perspective, I find that my participation in A Little Help is kind of that piece of things aren't the same. You're not doing the same thing every day. You're meeting new people. You're doing different things. You're interacting with them in ways that each one is unique, and I think it's stimulating to the brain to have that varying human interaction. Those were.
I totally agree with you, and that's largely the focus of our session in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. The other aspect that was bouncing around is when the notion of making a change. For me, when I attempt to make a change, it becomes the focus. It's the thing I think about when I go to sleep. It's the thing that I've got something up on the wall to remind me that, yeah, you've got to get this done, because otherwise the other things get in the way, or you tend to slide into your kind of structured activity. But
Right.
I need a visual that helps me to set off in a different direction than to make a change.